you for coming to my YouTube channel. My name is Chrissie Hodges. I'm an advocate. I'm an author of Pure OCD, the invisible side of obsessive compulsive disorder, and I do peer support and referral consultations for individuals looking for therapy for OCD in their state, in their area, or across state lines if there is no one available. And I guess joining to introduce herself, Alison Dotson.
Hi, Chrissy. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Alison Dotson. I'm an advocate for OCD awareness, and I'm the author of a book called Being Me with OCD, How I Learned to Obsess Less and Live My Life. And that's a nonfiction book, mostly for teenagers and young adults, but I've had feedback of people saying that, you know, maybe they're 65 or maybe they're 30 and married or whatever, that it's helpful for them too, and they just bypass the parts about struggling through high school and the things that don't apply.
Well, thank you for being here, Allison. I wanted to bring Allison on board for this topic. I've had a lot of response, good and sometimes bad, to the topic of pedophilia themed OCD, which I do have another video. And I do want to do, of course, a little disclaimer beforehand before we jump into some topics that Allison and I really feel like are things that are going to be helpful for people to hear, and for us to talk between ourselves about, to help you feel normalized a little bit when you have this type of OCD, and also know that you're not alone and that there is help. So first of all, I want to talk about on my channel, recently I've had some people come on and not be so nice, like they're just trolling the channel and saying really, really inappropriate things, and saying really mean things about myself and maybe even my business. And I do want to let you know that I watch closely for the comments, especially things that are triggering. I do my best to get to them as soon as possible. If I think something's triggering or inappropriate to be on the message boards, I will take it off. And if it's super bad, like this last time, I will block the person from being able to comment. There are a lot of people that come on here that don't understand OCD, that don't understand the types of things that most of my videos are about: sexual, violent, blasphemous, intrusive thoughts. And they're going to come on here, and instead of listening to the content, they're going to just want to be assholes. And so I just want you to know, I take whatever comments are saying, I take it seriously. So I'm not just going to be like, F you, and get rid of it without reading it and trying to understand where the person's coming from. And I decide whether or not I'm going to try to educate this person, or whether or not I'm just going to get rid of the comment. For this particular topic, I'm not going to really decide whether or not I want to try to educate someone if you're going to come on here and post something that's really triggering, mean, or not understanding at all or listening to anything about the content. Pedophilia themed OCD is not an uncommon thing. It is absolutely tormenting and torturous for people who have it. Allison is actually in a few minutes going to explain what this is, and also a little bit about OCD. And so I would invite you, if you're coming on here to have an attitude, or to just tell me that I'm some sort of pedophile sympathizer, I'd invite you to listen to all of the content and try to put yourself in the shoes of people that are suffering with this debilitating illness. The point of doing this video is to bring awareness that this is an actual type of OCD, the medical chronic illness that has evidence-based treatment, and that you are not alone with this theme. So you may even just listen to me, and some people have even responded, well, you could be a little nicer in your disclaimer. Well, I really don't give a shit, because this type of OCD, along with almost any violent and sexual themed OCD, is a tormenting type of OCD. I do not have time on this channel to try to argue with people that are not interested in having empathy or interested in hearing about a chronic disorder that destroys lives. So with that said, I want to go ahead and Allison's going to give us a little bit of an overview of what OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is, and how the theme of pedophilia can come up, and what that's like in having OCD. Allison?
Thank you, Chrissy. Yeah, so obsessive compulsive disorder, I mean, there are 3 words right there. Obsessive, that relates to obsessions, or what we often call intrusive thoughts. Now, these are all upsetting, unwanted thoughts. You don't want them. You wouldn't wish them on your worst enemy. And pretty much the harder you try to get rid of them, the stronger they get. So it's just, this thing is about the disorder is your intuition is to say, go away, I don't want this. And that doesn't help. And another way that people try to make the pain of the intrusive thoughts go away is with the compulsive component. So that's compulsive behaviors. So my intrusive thought is pedophilia, and I feel so dirty on the inside that I'm going to be washing my hands compulsively something times a day to try to feel better and try to maybe undo these thoughts. That's just an example. Any number of combinations. And Chrissie and I mostly experience, the both of us, is mental compulsions. You may not have the hand washing, the, checking to make sure the oven's off, all those things that people usually identify with OCD. You may have that you're trying to replace your bad thoughts with good thoughts. That's called neutralizing them. You could ruminate. There are just all kinds of things. Maybe you're praying a lot and maybe no one would ever know you're praying a lot because it's all on the inside. And now this is where disorder comes in, and this is a very important component of the whole description of OCD, and saying, this is why it bothers us when people say I'm so OCD because I have to have my socks all perfect. It's that disorder. It means that the obsessions and compulsions are taking up a huge chunk of your time. It's not just like a passing thing. Of course, once you get into recovery, calm down and you can get it to a manageable place. But the is that it's disruptive to your life. So there are many quote unquote themes of OCD. I think most people identify with or assume that it means that you have a germ phobia or you're super organized or whatever. And some people with OCD do have a germ phobia. They do have contamination fears. And that this is not to say that those fears aren't valid or that isn't part of OCD too. It's just that that's a super narrow definition. So a really common thing that people have is taboo obsessions. So blasphemous, sexual, violent. And the reason they're called taboo is that they aren't generally accepted by society. I mean, there are some things in our society almost across the world that just aren't acceptable. So when we have these thoughts, it's really upsetting. Some of it may just be taboo in your community. Maybe you're a Christian and in your community being gay isn't okay. Or it could be, in your family, it's not okay to be gay, or, that's just an example. But I think one of the hardest things about having theme is that you feel alone and you feel like you can't talk to anybody about it, especially when you don't know yet that it's OCD and all you're dealing with are, I'm afraid I'm going to molest a child. I'm afraid to have a baby because I'll have to change its diaper and I'm going to do something or think something. You may worry that you're afraid you're going to touch a family member inappropriately. All of these things are so hard. I mean, it's hard enough to think them, but it's maybe harder to try to seek help and tell somebody. How do you tell your mom, I'm afraid I want to have sex with you? That's not an easy conversation. But these intrusive thoughts are like any other obsessions. Normal, common to have. They don't say anything about your character. However, they sure make you feel like they're saying something about your character. Because it's not just, I shouldn't say just, where it's like, oh gosh, I'm really afraid I'm going to get a disease. And that's a serious, scary thing. To be judged by other people for that.
Right. So just to add to that, and I, in my own experience, I have had every sexual intrusive thought across the board. And so pedophilia intrusive thoughts have happened to me and they are terrifying. And when they did happen, I actually was able to go, oh, okay, here they are. I've worked with enough people that have this, but it just has this way of weaseling its way in and going, but if you
Mm-hmm.
thought it, there must be some truth to it. And so then all of a sudden I'm evaluating, you know, my relationship with my partner's son, or my relationship with anyone I've ever been in contact with. Oh my gosh, did I touch someone inappropriately? Why would I even think this thing? Why would this? Why would that? Now, this kind of moves us to the first topic that I want Alison and I to discuss. I took these topics that we're going to discuss, a couple of them I took actually off of people who have come onto my other video and said really negative things about, and I want to address them. Not because, you know, I'm exposing the person that said it, but because I think these are valid comments and valid questions that people who don't have understand or OCD about this type of OCD. So the first one is pedophilia themed OCD doesn't exist. The same way a lot of people will say homosexual themed OCD does not exist. If you've seen this on the channel, I'm sorry. I try to get them off like as soon as possible because I know they're triggering. And people will say, you're just in the closet as someone who's a homosexual, or you're just in the closet about being a pedophile, and you're just wanting some sort of mental illness to mask that you really have this. I mean, I have had several comments like this on several of the different videos that I've done. Probably my biggest response to that is, first of all, you should watch the videos and understand the content. That pedophilia OCD, this is not something that people want or that they desire. This is a huge distinction. So OCD is ego dystonic. What that means is that we have insight that the thoughts and the fears that we're having are not aligned with who we are. They are not aligned with what we want, what we desire, and what our character is. However, we cannot stop thinking. We can't stop worrying that because we had the thought, there must be some truth. That insight really does work against us when it comes to OCD, because then we think to ourselves, but I know this isn't real, but I can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest or the best way that I had someone describe it to me was Matt Miles, who is an OCD specialist here in Denver. He said the difference between someone who has pedophilia themed OCD versus someone who is an actual pedophile is someone who is a pedophile is going to go to a playground and eat lunch because they have a desire to want to see children. They have a desire to see this, and they do not feel that anxiety about it. Someone who has pedophilia themed OCD will drive 100 miles out of the way so they do not see a playground. They will avoid things because they are so afraid if they see them and experience anxiety. That is telling some truth. That is all of a sudden proving that perhaps this fear is correct. It is just like any other type of OCD where we are doing compulsions day in and day out, trying to escape having to feel the anxiety associated with these thoughts. I want to reiterate what Alison said earlier. These are just intrusive thoughts that every single person on the planet has intrusive thoughts that they don't want or that they wish that they didn't have. Ours, unfortunately, are accompanied by anxiety. We get these thoughts. We think there has to be something that I can do I need to put this out. I'm in danger. Why would I think this? I've got to do something because this isn't right and this isn't part of what I want. And that compulsion will give you some relief for a bit of time, but then it comes right back. So when people often comment, you're just in the closet, you really are a pedophile, or you really are a homosexual, or you really, you know, whatever, you really are violent and you might snap and kill your family. You know, my thought to that is no, there is an absolute distinction, and any OCD therapist that would treat could back that statement up. It is the desire versus the fear. And it's very, very, very important to understand that distinction. Alison, what are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. We often have to tell people that there's a difference between a sexual fantasy and a sexual fear or intrusive thought. A sexual fantasy, you're happy to have it. It's something that like you willingly engage in. It's a pleasant thing. A sexual intrusive thought is so upsetting. And it's not just upsetting in the moment that you're having it, you know, when you kind of feel the panic and your stomach drops and you sweat. It's upsetting long after that, because it makes you question who you are as a person. It
Yep.
makes you worry that you're deviant, that you're capable of hurting someone. Just from my own experience, even though I felt like I knew that this wasn't who I was or something that I wanted to do, the persistent nature of it makes you question yourself. How can you not when that's happening? Um, so yeah, it's a huge difference when you find yourself avoiding your loved ones, avoiding going to the grocery store when it's busy and families are there, avoiding going to the mall because children might be there. That's the type of thing that happens when you have pedophilia OCD. If you are a pedophile, you're seeking all these things out because that's what you want, just like you said. Um, but it is crushing. You don't want to live when this is your life, pretty much. And it's so distressing. And then to hear someone say that, well, maybe it's just something that you want. I mean, those are our thoughts that we're pushing away ourselves all the time, and we don't want to hear it from someone else, especially someone who doesn't understand that it's a disorder. And I do want to acknowledge that, like, hearing that word, I understand why people would go, oh my God, because it's a big deal to abuse a child. And if that's all they can see and hear, I get that. I just really hope that they would look beyond that and try to learn that this is part of a disorder and it really shouldn't be treated any differently from any other intrusive thought.
And with that said, Allison and I, a little bit later in this video, are going to talk about some ways to communicate this, especially to a therapist and someone that can help you. But moving forward, and Allison brought this to my attention when we first talked about doing this video, which is just trying to educate what POCD is, and then hopefully helping you see that you're not alone and that treatment is available. But she did talk about how, and I have seen this in working with clients in peer support recently, just the uptick in triggering of the pedophilia themed OCD because of all of the things that have been going on in the media. And from what I understand, and especially working with clients, this is not just the United States, this is also over the UK. And there just seems to be kind of this outing of people who have participated in pedophilia, or if it's not prepubescent or whatever, it is this participation of sexual acts with a minor. And so I know that this has got to be triggering. And so we just wanted to address that. And Allison, I'm just going to let you comment first.
Sure. I mean, if you're paying any attention to the news, you're seeing that it seems like every day there's something coming out, not just about pedophilia, but just about this person. Oh, it turns out he's been doing inappropriate things, you know, that he's been using his power as a celebrity to coerce someone, or, you know, just it's everywhere. And I think no matter what your particular sexual theme is, because there's more than one, that will be triggering. Just hearing that there are people out there who have hurt people in a sexual way, that
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a reminder that it does happen. And we're always trying to tell ourselves that, you know, that's not us, we're not going to do that. And to hear that like other people do it and get away with it is kind of like, ah. But yes, in particular, a couple people have specifically been accused of pedophilia where they're preying on, you know, a 14-year-old. And that's really hard to see. And I guess for me, I know that it's not healthy for me to just completely check out from an OCD perspective, and then just also from the perspective of like in the world. So I am going to pay attention to the news. I am going to read these articles. Um, so I would encourage people, even if you're feeling triggered, try not to completely disengage from this whole topic. I mean, I think it's an important topic, but give yourself permission to take a break. This is nonstop. And it's okay, just because the news is on 24/7 doesn't mean that you have to be watching it 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
You can read your one article a day Or on this particular topic, maybe it's like once a week, you're just going to kind of, oh, I've heard that this is going on in the political world and I'm going to catch up with it. So I think just taking care of yourself, knowing that just because this is happening right now, it's actually not a message to you, even though it feels like it. I
Yes.
think when you have OCD, it's like you really feel like everything's about you, but in the worst possible way. Like, this is a sign from God. This is a sign that, I really need to listen to this. Maybe I should be confessing something. Have I done something? Has something been done to me and I repressed it? I mean, you can just go down a rabbit hole, and it's scary. It's really scary. No one wants to try to dig into their past and try to think of bad things that may have happened or not happened. Um, so just remember, it's part of the news cycle right now. There's always going to be something. I know, like when there's mass shootings, if you have violent obsessions, that's really triggering. Um, but it doesn't mean anything. It's not a secret message. It just feels like it.
It's not proof or disproof, even though
Exactly.
it's so easy to see it as that. It's so easy to see it as, well, you see something on the news, or you see a high profile person, and then having people still support that person.
Yep.
And you think to yourself, why would anybody support this person? Does that mean that it's okay to do it? And so your mind starts going in and out. But remember, I always try to tell this to people, that when you have an obsession, it's on your radar. You are looking for it everywhere, and you can find proof and disproof any place on the planet, in any corner, any crumb, any here or there. You can find it if you're looking.
Yep.
And so I did write a couple things down while someone was talking. So, I can't even read my handwriting on the one thing I was like watching and writing at the same time. But one of the things that I do think that can get complicated is, especially with a lot of high profile people coming out talking about how they have assaulted age minors or pedophilia, is one of the thoughts that might come into the mind is, if they are capable, maybe I am too.
Yeah.
Or did they feel like I felt now, and then they snap and something happened? Because this is always a fear with sexual and violent intrusive thoughts. There's always that urge component that, and if you don't have OCD and you're here, to get pissed off, and you just heard me say urge, just let me explain. Like, OCD can absolutely affect your body. It can affect how you're responding. Anybody that has adrenaline, when they're in adrenaline and anxiety, can go hand in hand sometimes. And when you're feeling these things, it may feel like, oh my God, I have an urge. And what if I snap and do something? And when you see things from these high profile people, maybe even people that you've loved and respected through the years, all of a sudden you may think, oh my gosh, if that person is capable, what if I am? And then that can send you into a huge terror. But also what if they felt the same way that I did, and then this was the time that they snapped and did it, and they just got away with it all these years? That is another rabbit hole to go down. Probably the biggest. This doesn't really compare that much, but I remember feeling this way when Chester Bennington attempted or completed suicide. And one of my biggest things is I get suicidal thoughts as a symptom. And I just thought, I went through a little period of, oh my gosh, I just love him and his music. This happened to him. What if that means I am capable of it too? And that turned into a humongous rabbit hole. And so what we do know about OCD is that you give it an inch, it will give you 1,000 miles for you to be tortured. And so just wanted to bring that to the forefront. Alison had, kind of that great advice of, there is a balance between exposing yourself to it, but also, not saturating yourself. And I want to say something really weird, but it's true. When people have obsessions like we have, sexual, violent, intrusive thoughts, kind of taboo, oftentimes we'll be baited by headlines, and you'll have this weird urge to want to read it. but then knowing if you read it, it's going to trigger you. But you cannot sometimes control OCD, whereas maybe if you read it, you'll be triggered, but maybe it will prove that this isn't real. And so you end up clicking on the link, you end up reading it, and then you're just in a place of horror. Mm-hmm. Why did I read that? That must mean that there was something that I wanted to read it, and now this proves or whatever. So I just wanted to throw that in there because it just popped up in my head. And it is when I am dealing with sexual intrusive thoughts and I see a headline, there is this weird urge, like, click it. And if I don't click it, then I worry about why I didn't click it. Does that make sense, Alison?
Oh, totally. And actually, you know, people with OCD tend to have wild imaginations. That's part of the problem. So if I see something like that, or I start to hear like the news and it's starting to say something that I know will be triggering, and I make the choice not to read it or to click off the TV, my brain will take me to than the actual story was going to. So there's that side of it too. I fill in the blanks to be than it actually is. And so it's just my mind fueling what it could have been. So the healthiest thing is just read it or just watch it. And now you know the facts, and you know, maybe it's not as upsetting as you thought it was. And it's okay to not be upset all the time. I mean, that's something that I think we think is like, I didn't have anxiety from that. Oh my God, it's so scary. You have anxiety over not having anxiety. But it's like, it's okay to read a story or to hear something on the news and not be hugely impacted by it every single time. Like, that's okay.
Yeah. So the next comment that I wanted to comment on, and I got this a long time ago, and it was very upsetting to me. And mainly because I'm sensitive too, and I tend to ruminate too, because I have OCD. But somebody came onto my page and they watched the pedophilia themed OCD video that I did, and just really left some really ugly, nasty comments. And basically, it was because I said something like, have sexually themed OCD obsessions are no more likely to, in the end, do these things than any other normal person that doesn't have OCD. So, you know, trying not to give reassurance, but also just saying like, this is a fear of these things.
Yes.
Versus a desire. And so this person came on and put this really nasty comment and just said something like, well, you're just a peer support specialist and you're not a professional and an advocate, and you know, you're just an advocate. And then Alison also is just, we're just advocates, so we shouldn't be talking about these things. And people out there that are actually okay. So I'm going to go ahead and comment on this. First of all, pedophilia themed OCD or any sort of sexual or violent themed OCD, like if you're here, dangerous. Like, you are deemed as having a mental illness that has intrusive thoughts of a very disturbing and scary, tormenting nature. So I am absolutely within my right, in the research I've done, the people across the world that I have worked with that have these types of things, to say they are no more likely than a normal human being to have these things happen in reality. And in fact, I would like to back that up. And if anybody has any questions about the credibility of this, go to Stuart Ralph at the OCD Stories and his podcast with Dr. Stephen Phillipson. He is one of the biggest pioneers of this type of OCD, most world-renowned OCD therapists and doctors. And he says on that podcast, he says, of any people I have worked with through the years who have pedophilia themed OCD, would offer to these people, you could spend time with my children alone for days, and I would know that I could trust them more than an average human being. Yep. So right there, if anyone wants to, you know, say that I'm not credible, we'll go onto there, and I dare you to tell Dr. Stephen Phillipson that he's not credible. But at the same time, I do want to say that being someone who has lived with OCD and an advocate and someone who works every single day with people who have OCD, I absolutely understand OCD from the inside out. I know what it feels like to have these horrific obsessions. I know what it feels like to know that they're not true, but I can't stop thinking about them. I know what it feels like to be rock bottom and think that my only out is suicide. What it feels like. But you know what else I know? I also know what it feels like to come back from it. I know what it feels like to move into recovery, to work with a specialist or put medication into my mouth and feel the difference and know coming on the other side of recovery, wow, this really was a debilitating mental illness that really took me down at one point. So see, I know both sides. I know what it feels like to be in it, and then I know what it feels to be outside of it. So if anything, I know exactly how to walk alongside people who have OCD and tell them that what you're experiencing and the fear and the panic and all of the symptoms that you're having, this is normal when you have OCD, because I have been there too. And I have a wonderful therapist who walked me every step of the way through treatment and got me to a point where it did not impede or control my life anymore. So I may not be a clinical therapist that can sit here and tell you every intricate detail of the clinical diagnosis of OCD, but I can tell you I've been on both sides. And so that does make me qualified to do videos like this to help other people suffering around the world to know you are not alone. You are looking at two people right now, Alison and myself, that understand to the core how this can rock you and destroy your life. So that is my goal here. That's always my goal with these videos. And for all of you who've been through with me through this whole time, I just thank you for being here. Anyway, Alison, on that topic.
Well, I don't know if you can trust someone more than someone who has OCD to do their thorough research on something. We've read about this 100 times. Every book, every article, we've checked and we've double checked. We know that the facts are there and we can back it up. But also, I mean, it's just a ridiculous notion that you that you don't have experience or that your life experience isn't enough to qualify you to give advice, right? I mean, it's like if I were diagnosed with cancer and I was really afraid of like, what does this mean? What's chemo like? Yeah, I'm going to ask the doctor questions, of course, but I also want to talk to someone else who's had cancer, who's been through chemo and radiation. I want peer support. I want to be able to talk to someone who's been through it and all the emotional hurdles and struggles. And I mean, that's what you and I are trying to do. Like, yes, we're trying to educate people, but not with the pretense that we're somehow more qualified than someone else, but that, yeah, we've been through it. We've had the rock bottoms and come out the other side with some incredible highs as well. And, Chrissie, I'm sure would say this has been true for her, that we have good days and bad days too. So we understand that component. We can say, yeah, I've done a lot better, but that doesn't mean I don't have intrusive thoughts. So if you're still having that, don't worry, it's okay. And also, just to add one more thing, you and I, Chrissie, have both talked to many other people with OCD. It's not just like, well, this is how it was for me. It's you start to see themes and commonalities between people. Like we can always say, like, for me, the most common question I get is, what if it's not really OCD? So you start to see this and like you kind of do become an expert, at least on that level. So that's what matters. We're trying to help people feel less alone. We're not trying to be frauds. Just want to help people.
And I think the bottom line is knowing that you're not alone. That's this theme in particular. And then Alison and I are going to talk about, some common fears about talking openly about this, but this fear in general can feel so isolating and so lonely. And I was telling Stephen Smith of No CD today, because I saw him at the airport. A little shout out to you, Stephen. I was telling him like my sole goal in doing advocacy is, how can I reach people that are even too afraid to type in the word pedophilia into the community? How can I reach those people and show them you can get help? Help is available if you have POCD, and no, you do not have to fear that you're the one person in the world that therapy won't work for, like, because that's another big, secondary fear, or that, well, what if it proves that you really are and you have to face it? Like, the whole point is reaching people and knowing that you're not alone, because this fear in particular is the one that keeps people silent and terrified for years. So with that, Alison, just kind of like back and forth a little, like, what are some of the things, what are some of the reasons why, or the fears that people have in speaking out, even telling a therapist or telling their family members or their spouse, or, what are some of those things? And I guess we could just kind of like go one back and
Sure.
forth.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from my own experience that the reason I was afraid to tell anyone, and this makes a difference too when you don't know it's OCD and you really just think that it's possible that, like, you are a child predator. My fear in telling my boyfriend at the time is he's not going to want to marry me. In fact, he'll probably hate me. He's not going to want to be with someone like me. We can't have kids because I would be a terrible parent. I didn't want to tell my own mom because she loves kids. She loves me, but could she really love me after knowing something like that? Does family support only go so far? Will they give up on you because this is the one thing that's just so unacceptable and so terrible, and you're a monster? Seeking professional help, if you don't go to an OCD specialist, I think it's important to note that it is possible that an untrained therapist, or a therapist who doesn't know about OCD and about pedophilia OCD, that they could give you bad advice. And bad things do sometimes happen when you tell the wrong person. So I kind of just want to be real about that. But that is a fear, that if you go to someone who really just doesn't know, and they feel like, well, to protect children, I have to like report this person.
Mm-hmm.
So those are common fears. No one wants to lose their family. No one wants to go to jail, and you can't go to jail over thoughts, just FYI. No one wants to lose all that stuff. So it's terrifying. But I know we're not going back and forth. Sorry, I just kind of took.
No, I think that was all kind of encompassing of one particular thing. I think, to add to that, like, I think that, and one of the main fears that kept me silent is that I was afraid, even though, and again, pedophilia OCD versus pedophilia is fear versus desire. Any sort of sexual and violent intrusive thought is fear, worrying that this could happen, or what if I'm that person, versus I am this person and this is what I want and this is what, this is what I'm going to do. I think the thing that kept me quiet in my sexual intrusive thoughts mainly was the homosexual OCD. Not there's anything wrong with it, but I worried that no one would believe me. And I do feel like in the succession of events that happened, I had good reason to worry that. It was back in the 90s. Not a lot of therapists knew about OCD. And I did see a therapist who tried to do psychotherapy and that did not understand what this was, and was like, well, maybe you're just in the closet, which makes things worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that a lot of times people are so afraid that, what if I tell somebody and they believe this is what I want versus what I fear?
Yep.
And that fear is real. And I think it's a valid fear that you should have. However, just to concur with what Alison said, OCD specialists see this type of OCD all the time. They know how to treat it. They are not going to be surprised at anything you say. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I have met with someone for peer support or referral consultations, and they're like, I don't want to tell you what my fear is because I'm sure you've never heard of it before. And I'm like, oh, is it pedophilia OCD? And they're like,
how'd you know?
Yeah, because it's super common. It's Not uncommon at all. If you tell the right people, it isn't a matter of whether they believe you. If anything, they're going to empathize. And, Matt Miles, OCD specialist here, he always says, like, the first thing he does is normalize what you're going through. No matter what it is, I'm going to normalize the fact that I've seen hundreds of people that have pedophilia themed OCD and homosexual themed and violent intrusive thoughts. So I know that's tough. I know it's hard to overcome I'm so scared people won't believe me, but the right professionals will, the right advocates will, the right peer support, someone who is working with someone to help normalize and help you structure out a conversation that you can have with a therapist or with a family member, can help. What else, Allison?
Well, yeah, I think that kind of covers the fears. I was afraid I was going to go to jail. Which, again, I said, like, you can't really, like, I don't think we're that far into the future that it's like we're going to be able to arrest people for their thoughts. It's like some dystopian future. So it's terrifying. And if I could just share like my own experience, when I finally did find someone, and it was someone I found that I knew was an OCD specialist, he acted like this. I mean, he was empathetic, but it was like, this is not a big deal. Like, oh yeah, that theme. Oh, you have this and that. Okay, here's a book you should read, and here's this. And I mean, it was just like, I've been worried this whole time, and he is amazing. Like, he didn't like recoil in disgust. I thought first, oh, he's gonna judge me. He's gonna like, there's gonna be a button under his desk that he pushes, and then like 5 minutes later, the police will come. And I mean, I was so afraid, and maybe more than that, I was afraid that when I finally had the courage to make an appointment and get in front of this person who had the power to help me, that I wouldn't be able to say the words. That was maybe more terrifying than anything else. And that they'll say, no, this is an OCD. You're just a bad person. You're right. You are a danger to society. And like, I don't know what to do. Or, like that's a really scary thing too. Like, no, you're just perverted. So a way that you can alleviate some of that fear, if you're afraid that you won't be able to actually say the words, is to kind of bring along maybe an article you've read, and it's like, well, this is about pedophilia OCD. Or, like you read The Imp of the Mind by Lee Baer, which is all about taboo intrusive thoughts. And you say like, here's the passage that really spoke to me. And you can kind of separate it from yourself a little bit. So it's not all about you if you kind of still feel really afraid about that, and just say, this is what I've experienced. Like, is this something you can help me with? I know you didn't ask for advice, but I just went with it.
Totally fine. And then finally, I think with all of that said, you may be thinking to yourself, well, what is treatment like? And I think the scariest part is to hear exposure response prevention as evidence-based treatment, that combined with medication or without, either way, you may think to yourself, there's no way I'm exposing myself. No, like there are horror stories all out there about it. Try not to read them, but a qualified therapist, someone who works with this all the time, is really treating the OCD. They are not trying to find out whether you are or you aren't a pedophile. In fact, like at the end of treatment for any sort of sexual, violent, intrusive thoughts, contamination, anything, at the end of treatment, that isn't the goal. The goal is to be able to, when the thoughts come, to not react with compulsions, not have the anxiety rule your entire life. And I know that can feel really scary. And I know that you think to yourself, all I want are the thoughts to be gone. I just can't handle this. This means something. Thoughts mean nothing. Mm-hmm. There's your reassurance. Thoughts mean nothing. Everybody has thoughts every single day. If we really put stock into every single thought that all of us had all the time, I mean, shit would be real up in here all the time. So a good therapist, a good OCD therapist will be able to give you some psychoeducation, will be able to help you ease in a slow process how to unravel this and how to get back to a life that is meaningful without this tormenting beast on your back all the time. If you are looking for an OCD specialist, here are a couple things that you need to know. If a therapist is not doing ERP, they cannot treat OCD. If you are seeing a psychiatrist, though, and you are looking for medication, this is a different story. If this is a way you want to manage it, okay. Yes, a psychiatrist that knows and understands OCD, that would be great too. But if you're looking to do behavioral therapy, anybody that does not do exposure response prevention, ERP, if they say that they treat OCD, do ERP, they cannot treat it, okay? A couple things that you can do. The International OCD Foundation website has a help button. However, not everybody in their database is specialized. So please vet the therapist. Please call them and ask them if they do ERP. Ask them for success stories. Ask them for the different themes they've treated. Do research on them and find out if they're an expert. If not, I do consultations to help you find them. And if there isn't anyone in your area, there are therapists that will go across state lines to help via telehealth, teletherapy, and it works just as good as the other. I had phone therapy and it was fine. That's the service. I also provide peer support, which is to help normalize and support not only the symptoms, but the emotional turmoil that comes with having this theme and others, because I know how lonely and scary you feel. Because you're not alone. You're looking at two people today that have dealt with these horrible, horrible fears. And we have been through successful treatment and now live in recovery. Alison, wanted to kind of get your final thoughts and also to thank you so much for being here. As usual, it's always a pleasure. You know, I just love you.
Oh, well, I love you. Oh my gosh. This is always the time, like my dogs, I'm going to let my dog out of the room. I don't know if you heard him scratching. Go away.
This seems to be like a theme. Oh, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi.
Okay. Yes. It's a little.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Just wanted to add, you said, a lot of times people contact me looking for someone who treats pure, or I'm looking for someone who treats HOCD, which is homosexual OCD. What I usually say is, I mean, it's great to understand those terms and those things, but a good qualified OCD therapist can treat any theme you have.
Yes.
There isn't a different treatment just because theme is more upsetting or that it's taboo or whatever. So there was a time in my life where I didn't want to die, but I pretty much feel alive. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm so grateful that it all worked out. I'm grateful that I got help. I'm grateful that I've met people like Chrissie and that together to reach other people, because we've been there in that very low spot where we just thought there is no one else on earth who has been through what I'm going through right now. And that's just not true. We can work together.
Well, thank you, Alison. Alison is the author of Being Me with OCD. She also blogs for the International OCD Foundation, and she does like questions on it's like Tuesdays, interviews on Tuesdays with people who live with OCD and treat OCD and anything OCD. Very, very informational.
Thank you.
Alison is connected with people worldwide with OCD, and just such an inspiration in the OCD community. So
thank
you for being here as usual.
Thank you for having me.
And for my listeners, thank you for being here. I hope that you understood like why I needed this disclaimer with the sensitivity of the topic. I just want to leave you with, you are not alone. This is a tough theme. It is very scary, but trust me, there are people all over the world that have the same symptoms, the same fears, and the same hesitance to reach out and get help. But help is available. Treatment is there for you. It's evidence-based and it works, and recovery is possible for anyone. If you are looking for referrals for therapists, or if you're looking for peer support, please go to chrissiehodges.com. Email me at ocd.chrissy@gmail.com or treatmentforocd.com, and we'll figure out a way to connect. Thank you for being here, and this is a great community, and I am so appreciative of you being here, and for us to really realize that OCD is a medical chronic mental illness and that you don't have to walk that path alone. We are here for you, and recovery is possible for anyone. Bye.